Hi, welcome back to Reading Pathways. I'm Matt. And for Tag Tuesday today, I do have a tag to do, try to do coherently if I can. This is the favorite quotes tag. And I have some notes here to help out with this. So it was originated by Sailing Through Books. And she did a really nice job with this, putting together this original tag and coming up with some great answers. And then I was tagged to do this by Isiah over at That Reading Guy, who also had a really thoughtful and excellent response to this tag. So thanks to Isiah for tagging me to do this. And yeah, so basically just going over some quotes. I'll just say offhand, I don't know if I would call some of these favorite quotes. Kind of the same disclaimer with some of my other videos where, you know, I don't know if I've amassed enough of a reading life at this point to have a huge roster of quotes ready to go to pick for something like this, but I tried to think through some things, and some of them might qualify a little more as ideas versus quotes, but there's some language that I tried to tie into it. And the other thing being, I sprinkled in one or two musical quotes in here from songs as well, because I still, more often than not, my mind drifts toward musical quotes and lyrics when I think of quotes versus literary ones. The more I read, hopefully I'll tip the scales and balance that out a little bit, but some musical lyrics did work their way into this. So yeah, going through the prompts. So number one is a quote that you return to in hard times. So with this is one where it may qualify as a little more of an idea, but I'm going to try to keep these somewhat short if I can. So basically, where my mind always goes with this is kind of a epiphany, somewhat of an epiphany that I had at some point in my life where I guess, I don't know if you'd call it a hard time, but basically had this realization. And the realization started from a movie, which was It's a Wonderful Life. And this kind of moment here of George Bailey on the bridge, sort of begging and pleading, regretting his his thoughts of dissatisfaction with his life and wanting nothing more than to be returned to his life. That scene and that moment kind of encapsulates for me the idea of this answer. So basically, it's the idea of it's like the image of being removed from your life or your family or whatever, and looking in on it, but not being a participant in it. And to me, that would bring about nothing more than sheer desperation to undo that and to make things right and get back to the life that you have, no matter what that life is. And so I think that that's captured really well here in this movie, in this moment. But when I had that epiphany, I tried to trace that idea back to literature a little bit. And I think that you can probably trace it back to A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And I tried to pull that up and see if I could pull some language that was kind of complementary to that scene. And what I came upon here was sort of the end, you know, the wrapping up part of the Christmas Carol, and when Scrooge is sort of begging and pleading in much the same way with the ghost of Christmas yet to come, when he shows him his gravestone and the fact that he's passed on and, you know, he's been removed from the world that he seems to despise when he's in it, but then he has second thoughts. So then, of course, in the little Kindle version here that I read, you get the reproduction of the image here of Scrooge begging and pleading with the ghost of Christmas yet to come. So the quote, this is supposed to be about quotes, right? So I'm getting to the language. So, so am I that man who lay upon the bed, he cried upon his knees. The finger pointed from the grave to him and back again. No, spirit, oh no, no. The finger still was there. Spirit, he cried, tight clutching at its robe, hear me. I am not the man I was. I will not be the man I must have been but for this intercourse. Why show me this if I am past all hope? For the first time the hand appeared to shake. Good spirit, he pursued, and down upon the ground he fell before it. Your nature intercedes for me and pities me. Assure me that I yet may change these shadows you have shown me by an altered life. The kind hand trembled. I will honor Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. I will live in the past, the present, the future. The spirits of all three shall strive within me. I will not shut out the lessons that they teach. Oh, tell me I may sponge away the writing on this stone. In his agony, he caught the spectral hand. It sought to free itself, but he was strong in his entreaty and detained it. The spirit, stronger yet, repulsed him. Holding up his hands in a last prayer to have his fate reversed, he saw an alteration in the phantom's hood and dress. It shrunk, collapsed, and dwindled down into a bedpost. And then, of course, you move to stave 5, the final part of the novella, and it's the end of it. Yes, and the bedpost was his own. And then it changes from Scrooge's desperation and horror into his elation and joy at being put back in his life. And so that's the same kind of idea there. Any take on that idea really resonates with me. And the final lineage of this that I think fits with this would be Goethe's Faust, the Faust legend, however it's done. I've skimmed through this. I've read some portions. I haven't ever sat down and read the full thing, which I plan to do. But, you know, in short, I think the same kind of idea is being played within Faust here, where there's a deal made on Faust's behalf that he wants to experience an eternally joyful moment that lasts forever, but in exchange has to sell his soul basically to Mephistopheles, the devil figure in the story. And there comes a part where his love interest, Gretchen, is going to be imprisoned, I think, or killed as part of the bargain that Faust agreed to. And so I skimmed through this to try to find sort of comparable language in here. And so there's a part near the end of the play in the section Gloomy Day Field. And they're talking about Gretchen, the love interest of Faust. Faust, save her, or else beware the most dreadful curse on you for ages. Mephistopheles, I cannot undo the bounds of the avenger, nor draw back the bolts. Save her. Who was it that plunged her into ruin, I or you? And then a little bit lower down, Faust, take me to her. She shall be free. Mephistopheles, and the risk that you would run, let me tell you, the blood guilt by your hand still lies upon the town. Avenging spirits hover over the site of the murder, lying in wait for the returning killer. Faust, take me to her, I tell you, and set her free. Mephistopheles, I will take you there, and now listen. This is the limit of what I can do. After all, am I all-powerful on earth and in heaven? First, I will befog the jailer's senses. Then you seize the keys and lead her out yourself. I will keep watch. The magic horses are at the ready. I will whisk you both away. That much I can do. Faust, let us move now. So again, same kind of desperation to undo the feeling of being regretful of your life, regretful of your circumstance, and doing anything, giving anything to just simply undo that regret and return to the life that you were dealt, basically. And so I think all three of those works kind of touch on that. So that's always the quote or the idea that I go back to in hard times. And I'll try to speed through the rest of these if I can. So the second prompt is a quote that sums up your philosophy on life. One or two quotes. You know, that's definitely a big one, but the thing I always sort of go back to on that one is contained in Plato's Republic, and it's none other than the very famous and infamous allegory of the cave, where Socrates and his interloper, whoever he's talking to at this point, I forget who, but he basically, they're going over what constitutes a just life and what constitutes a just society. And Socrates starts explaining the myth of the cave, the idea being, what if it were the case that all reality that we're experiencing isn't actually real? What if it's just pretend? What if it's shadows we're being shown and we're actually imprisoned in a cave? Wouldn't we try to escape that? And I think for me, you know, there's a lot you could take from the allegory of the cave, but what it's always meant to me is kind of the idea of always question and always doubt things and never sort of assume that what is the prevailing wisdom or what the masses are doing or saying or showing to you is necessarily the right way. Always instead sort of tilt your head in a different direction and try to find some other way that might be available, that might be better or truer. Not to say that, you know, you need to always be contrarian or something like that, but it's just always keep your mind open to the fact that what you're being shown or told might not be the right way. So, the language here, opening book 7 of the Republic, where the allegory of the cave begins, Socrates says, "Next then, I said, make an image of our nature in its education and want of education, likening it to a condition of the following kind. See human beings as though they were in an underground cave-like dwelling, with its entrance a long one open to the light across the whole width of the cave. They are in it from childhood, with their legs and necks in bonds, so that they are fixed, seeing only in front of them, unable because of the bond to turn their heads all the way around. Their light is from a burning fire far above and beyond them. Between the fire and the prisoners there is a road above, along which we see a wall, built like the partitious puppet handlers set in front of the human beings and over which they show the puppets." And then skipping ahead to the next page. "Now consider," I said, "what their release and healing from bonds and folly would be like if something of this sort were by nature to happen to them. Take a man who is released and suddenly compelled to stand up, to turn his neck around, to walk and look up toward the light, and who, moreover, in doing all this in pain, and because he is dazzled, is unable to make out those things whose shadows he saw before. What do you suppose he'd say if someone were to tell him that before he saw silly nothings, while now, because he is somewhat nearer to what is, and more turned toward beings he sees more correctly, and in particular showing him each of the things that pass by, were to compel the man to answer his questions about what they are? Don't you suppose he'd be at a loss, and believe that what was seen before is truer than what is now shown?" So that's, the cave idea of basically just question whether the reality that's being shown to you or told to you or that you're born into may be everything that there is, or maybe you may need to dig deep and look a little bit further, or look in a different direction for something else, and something maybe a little more true. And there's a quick music quote I want to throw onto this one too at the end, and that is the final line of The Sound of Silence by Simon and Garfunkel. So the line is, the sign flashed out its warning in the words that it was forming, and the sign said, "The words of the prophets are written on the subway walls, the tenement halls, whispered in the sounds of silence." So I think that line has really always struck me, and I think it reminds me a little bit of the cave allegory in a way of like, it's sort of an urge to, you need to be looking elsewhere. So you have the image of a busy, and here's the image that I pulled up for this with Simon and Garfunkel on the Sound of Silence album. And it's kind of the idea of you need to look elsewhere, and there might be things that are truer that are right under your nose that you're ignoring in your everyday life. So you get the image of sort of a busy New York City subway, and everybody's hustling and bustling to sort of just go about their business, and they're completely overlooking or even scorning sort of the writings and ramblings that are written on the subway walls. But what the song is suggesting, and what the idea is kind of make sure you pay attention to things like that. The words of the prophets could truly be contained within those writings, which most people write off as the ramblings of some insane person. So yeah, I think those two kind of play off each other pretty well. Okay, continuing on, we're going a little bit long already, so I'm going to really try to speed up with the rest of these. The third prompt is a quote that you love because it's beautifully written. So I tried to go with some of these for a few things I read this year that kind of have a lasting impact on me and are still sort of fresh. And when it comes to beautiful writing and beautiful language and beautiful scenes, the best example I've had this year so far in reading of that would be from this book, probably, Cutting for Stone, Abraham Verghese. So he is a doctor and an author who wrote this epic kind of tale of twins who were born in sort of traumatic circumstances in a hospital in Ethiopia. And unfortunately, the mother passes during the birth, and the father, who is also a surgeon in the hospital, disappears after they're born. So the twins are left to be raised and taken in essentially by two of the doctors in the hospital, one of which is Hema, who is the female obstetrician who delivered the babies, and another doctor, Ghosh, the male, and he kind of participated, but then when the father disappears, he takes on a more prominent role in the hospital. But so these two, so Ghosh has a love interest in Hema, which is alluded to earlier in the story, and then when they become sort of their de facto parents, they're brought together in, you know, these forced circumstances with these newborn twins, and one of them, Shiva, has some issues right out of the gate, including apnea. And what that means in the context of the story is that he's kind of not breathing when he's sleeping. So basically that's the context, and the most beautiful scenes in this book that have stuck with me have been the early scenes of the twins' lives when Hema and Ghosh get together in Hema's house and basically are watching over and starting to raise them. So, and at the same time, Ghosh is sort of sticking around based on his love interest in Hema, but also it turns into more than that, and it turns into more his devotion to the twins. And there is a series of scenes which they refer to as vigils, where Hema and Ghosh basically watch over these two, and they do it in shifts, and especially Shiva, since he has this apnea problem. So here's some of the language that really was just beautiful, I think, in some of these scenes. Ghosh sat in the chair, sipping coffee, a string wrapped around his finger, and the house silent around him. It was 2 a.m. The other end of the string connected to one of Hema's anklets, which he'd cut in half and looped around Shiva's foot. The tiny silver bells dangling from the anklet made a pleasant cymbal-like sound when the foot moved. And then so basically he straps this anklet with bells onto Shiva's ankle, which is his indicator if he's breathing or not. And they take turns sort of staying up and listening for this, but they also start reading together in this apartment because Hema has a series of great works of literature on the bookshelf, and so Ghosh starts reading, and Hema starts reading the same books, and then they sort of bond over that as well. And then here's just another portion that closes one of these scenes. And in the context of this scene, Ghosh also was planning on leaving Ethiopia and going to America, but this particular life circumstance ends up making him stick around. For 2 weeks, he and Hema kept a vigil over Shiva, getting help in the daytime but reserving the night for themselves. They had finished Middlemarch in a week, and it had given them plenty to discuss. He picked Zola's 3 cities trilogy, Paris, next, and that they both found absorbing. Shiva's episodes of apnea decreased from more than 20 a day to 2 a day, and then ceased. They extended their vigil into a 3rd week just to be on the safe side. Hema's sofa was too small for a man of Ghosh's proportions, and seeing him scrunched up there, she felt grateful to him and conscious of his sacrifice. It would have surprised her to know how much he relished occupying the space that she'd just vacated and covering himself with a blanket still scented with her dreams. The jingling of Shiva's ankle bracelet filtered into his sleep, and one night he dreamed that Hema was dancing for him, naked. It was so vivid, so real, that the next morning he hurried to Cook's Travel, waited till they opened, and canceled his ticket to America. He did it before he had any coffee or a chance to second-guess himself. And that's sort of the conclusion of these vigil scenes, where Hema and Ghosh are unexpectedly sort of raising and watching over the twins, and the fact that it dovetails with Ghosh's love interest in Hema, and the jingling of the ankle bracelet, ensuring that Shiva was doing okay. It just really was kind of a magical scene to watch unfold for me, and some of the language there was particularly beautiful, I thought. Okay, so number 4 is a poem you memorized, and why. So I really didn't have much here. I don't know if I've ever memorized a poem in its entirety, although I do think maybe at one point in time I had a good portion of Dylan Thomas's "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night" memorized. So pretty popular poem. Why I liked it, why I memorized it, it's just very strong, and it each stanza ends with sort of, rage, rage against the dying of the light. Do not go gentle into that good night. It's just an idea I really resonate with about, keep living, don't give in, especially as life goes on. Remember to just live every day. So it's short, so I'll read the poem because I don't have it memorized any longer, although once upon a time I think I had most of it. Do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words had forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who caught and sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. So certainly a popular one, and I'm sure comes to mind for some other people. But for me, it's one that I probably memorized at one point because it just was really spoke to me in terms of that struggle against letting the light fade out on life and really trying to rise up against that. And so a couple more. So a quote that defines like love or friendship, or makes you think about love or friendship. I didn't really have one offhand here, but this was another one where I tried to go to the bank of certain things I've read this year recently. And I went on my Kindle and tried to see if I had any annotations or highlights or anything from this year that might fit the bill here. And there was something that worked out pretty well on this one. And let's see if I can pull it up. This was from The Curious Case of Benjamin Button and Other Jazz Age Stories in the Penguin Classics from F. Scott Fitzgerald. So it's his short story collection that I read from the library earlier this year. And I highlighted something here that really jumped out at me at the time, and also did again just now in looking up something for this answer. Unfortunately, the highlight here doesn't identify which specific short story this language is from, and I can't recall which off the top of my head. It might be from the Curious Case of Benjamin Button, but I don't know for sure. But anyway, it's a very quick line, and it's just talking about a mother and her son, and it says, "The surge of love that had risen in her she lavished on Donald, her little boy, realizing him almost wonderingly as a part of her life." So the boy being Donald indicates to me that maybe this wasn't from A Curious Case of Benjamin Button, but the quote really spoke to me and kind of aligned with some of the way I feel about love sometimes, which if I had to sum it up in a quick sentence, it would be, to me, sometimes I look at love and think about love as kind of forgetting that the person you love is separate from you, if that makes sense. And I think that applies to children. It also applies to significant others and whatnot. But then sometimes in life, you do have those moments when that's kind of your default state. But then sometimes you'll look at them one day and it'll catch you off guard in a slightly different way than usual. And you'll have this big, at least I'm not going to try to speak for other people, but I will have this major revelatory moment of like, wow, sometimes I forget that person is separate from me and just a part of my life and not just like another limb of myself, if that makes sense. And so again, the surge of love that had risen in her she lavished on Donald, her little boy, realizing him almost wonderingly as a part of her life. And it is that kind of wondering feeling of like, what are you? Are you separate from me, or are we one and the same? And sometimes you have those moments where you look at them in a different light, and sometimes they seem like a part of you, and sometimes they seem apart from you. And I guess that line really captured that for me. And then let's see, there is number 6 is a quote that makes you feel seen. So for this one, I went with Walden, Henry David Thoreau. I haven't yet completed reading this whole book, but it's something that I've read from throughout the years, and I certainly had a period some years ago where I, read this pretty closely. And this is another popular quote. It's sort of a famous quote that originates out of this work, but it's right near the beginning in the section called Economy. The mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. From the desperate city, you go into the desperate country and have to console yourself with the bravery of minks and muskrats. A stereotyped but unconscious despair is concealed even under what are called the games and amusements of mankind. There is no play in them, for this comes after work, but it is a characteristic of wisdom not to do desperate things. So, the opening there, the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation, is certainly kind of a famous quote at this point. And the reason it made me feel seen was kind of hearkening back to some of the earlier things I said about, I'm always struck by quotes that reveal to you or highlight the idea that you don't want to languish. You don't want to have a life of quiet desperation. And so in this, I think what Thoreau is driving at in a lot of this book is that nature for him is kind of that thing. And I flagged one other part here later in the book, in the section called Solitude, where he says, "Yet I experience sometimes that the most sweet and tender, the most innocent and encouraging society may be found in any natural object, even for the poor misanthrope and most melancholy man. There can be no very black melancholy to him who lives in the midst of nature and has his senses still." So that to me is sort of like an answer 130 some odd pages later to the idea posed earlier on about the mass of men leading lives of quiet desperation, where Thoreau is kind of saying nature for him is sort of the cure to that. It's kind of, as long as you're alive, as long as you have your senses, and as long as nature is out there for you, you really can't be melancholy. You really can't have that quiet desperation. And so it's inspiring to me, and it made me feel seen when I first encountered it, in the sense of find what that thing is. If you're feeling quietly desperate, you're feeling melancholy, you're feeling unfulfilled. I do think it's true most men lead lives of quiet desperation if they don't find something that really sparks them inside and really keeps them going each day as something to look forward to and fulfilling them internally. And it's nature, I think, for Thoreau in this, and it could be anything for anybody else. But I think if you don't find something like that in life, you may end up in the masses of men who lead lives of quiet desperation. And so it kind of put a spotlight on me when I first read that, as like, don't be that. Don't be one of those people. Find something that brings you out of that, if that makes sense. And then finally, kind of a heavy one, a little bit here on a Tag Tuesday, but nevertheless, a quote that you would like to be read at your funeral. And I'm going to go with music here because nothing literary necessarily came to me for this. And when I think of like a funeral eulogy, I guess the most common thing you think of is kind of like a summary, I guess, or sort of like a summing up of, who you were as a person and what you stood for, what you did, that kind of thing. And there's a song, My Girls by Animal Collective, a pretty popular song, and I think kind of cliche-ish lyrics, but they really speak to me personally. And I wouldn't mind them being said at my funeral as sort of a final sum up of my accomplishments. And so basically, I do have a wife and I have two girls. So I liked the quote before I had two girls, but now it kind of cements it even further. And so the two parts of it that I would have read would be, there isn't much that I feel I need, a solid soul and the blood I bleed. With a little girl and by my spouse, I only want a proper house. And then later on, I don't mean to seem like I care about material things, like a social status. I just want 4 walls and adobe slabs for my girls. And then, of course, if you know the song, there's like a big woohoo chant after that point. I'd certainly recommend listening to it rather than having me monotonely deliver that line. But yeah, I really like that band and really love that song. And I think it kind of delivers a few of those lines that if you stamp that on my headstone one day as, what I accomplished in this life, then that would be okay. So yeah, that's it for the quotes. Thanks to anybody that sticks around to the end of this long-winded video. And thanks again to That Reading Guy for tagging me. And I'll put some links below into some other channels. I'd be curious to hear do this, but definitely anybody that sees this tag from Sailing Through Books or elsewhere, definitely be interested to hear your take as well. So thanks a lot, and hope to be back soon with more updates.